So what I wanted to talk about is, as individuals that are interested in the cutting edge of doing good, and there's sometimes like bad things that are happening. So to talk about, I want to make a little bit of a distinction between activism and activity. I just made up that one. Activism is geared more towards promoting political or social agenda, sometimes a little subversive. What I will be doing is voting for charity or doing for charity for a greater good. And I'm going to have two specific projects I have volunteered on in the past. The first one is the network. I want everybody real quick to think about your name. Think about something you know or something you love. Think about, when you think about that name, think about all the things that where you were born, your whole history. Then start thinking about what happened, what would happen, or how would you feel if all that history, all that knowledge with your name just disappeared. And it's gone. And there, according to the Department of Justice, there is a total of 11,606 open unidentified cases in the United States. In addition to that, there are 3,000 persons cases that have been closed in the last few years due to a lack of evidence. What the website several to make a consistent resource where armed detectives or just family members even just want to use person case site and scroll through, look at pictures, and see the time was found, the state in which this person was, belongings or that were found with this person, and it was done by people who want to give a voice to those who haven't been able to. And the databases that it pulls from include Project Eden, which is a forensic artist community, NEOISF, which is from the Department of Justice database, the National Crime Information Center, and various police departments are part of this system that can add more knowledge to these cases, because the biggest enemy of identifying some of these people is time. So the quicker that this information can get consolidated, the faster maybe some of these people can get identified. And since 2001, when this site was launched, 75 missing persons cases have been solved since the launch of the website. It doesn't sound like a lot, but that's 75 people who didn't have names are now named, and their families now know what happened. So, and there's some pictures of people from the database that have not been identified. And even like, it's still like sort of a little heavy, but even sometimes just perusing them, seeing if you like recognize anybody. I occasionally do. So. The next project I want to talk about is Thorn. Some people might have, it's actually been in the news quite recently. The co-founders are Ashton Kutcher and Demi Moore, and they went before Congress to get some, I think, some funding, and also to push awareness for the issue that Thorn is about. And Thorn used to be called Digital Defenders of Children. They've since changed their name. It's a They do have some paid positions that you can be part of, but all the products that they build are contributed just from like volunteers who want to participate in the project. And they build products that are used by tech companies and law enforcement agencies to identify and deter and target human trafficking and child exploitation. And one of the products that they came up with was the Shared Cash Program. If there is a company or a school system or anything that has the Shared Cash Program on their computer system, and there's an illicit file that's found, it will give it a unique fingerprint, upload it to the cloud, and then immediately disperse it to any other company that has this on their system. So they can quickly identify where this illicit image came from, who is maybe in the illicit image, and track it down faster. Another thing is the Be Free text shortcode. This was a program that allowed text messages to be received and archived by the National Human Trafficking Hotline. And this was way back in the early 2000s when text messaging was just sort of starting to become more prevalent. And survivors were telling the human trafficking hotline that they might have been able to be found faster or even communicate faster if they were able to text message rather than call. And Thorn developed a program that would allow the text messages to be archived and therefore then found faster. Makes sense. And currently they are working on a Spotlight project, which is a web-based law enforcement calibration program, which is similar to the DOE network, where police departments and law enforcement agencies can communicate faster. So if somebody finds an illicit photograph and this other group finds another illicit photograph, they can collaborate and see if it came from the same area faster. Any questions? Am I making any sense, or am I just rambling? So those are two projects that I have volunteered for in the past. One of the disadvantages, though, to volunteering for these things is because a lot of it is volunteer-based, people have lives outside and jobs outside of what's going on. So communication and distributing issues and finding people to work on this issue, work on this part of the project, it sometimes gets meshed up together, and sometimes you won't hear from your volunteer coordinator for weeks about stuff, and then sometimes like they sort of forget about you. So one of the other reasons why I kind of wanted to talk about this was to sort of get people's juices flowing on other ideas like Thorn and other ideas like the DOE network, and maybe develop an organization or a group that could make this collaboration easier. And then those two things that I talked about before are sort of like, for lack of a better word, social justice. You know, like there's a goal that everybody can get behind and help out with. These three websites are maybe more for if you want to volunteer to build a website for a church or a community group. These three websites can be resources for that. Code for Social Good and Donate Code are they're sort of like LinkedIn kind of websites where you make a profile or you post a project, and the person who's posted the project can find a volunteer that they want to use, and the volunteers can bid on a project they want to help with. And then volunteermatch.com has opportunities like that as well that aren't just tech related. You can also volunteer to do business analysis or just community outreach or other things like that. So, any questions? That's all I got.
you want to go next? You need a computer, right?
I need PC.
This month. Smart's a lot easier.
Appreciate it. Okay. All right, well, can you hear me in the back there? I know we have the motors going on and everything. So welcome. My name is Kenyon Mau. I'm with Emerald Resource Group, and I'm here to talk about kind of something that Justin and I have been talking about for a while. Several months ago, after one of our meetings here, I was asking Justin, you know, is there something in particular that maybe you know, he could think of that maybe the clientele here would really be interested in? He goes, you know, we talk a lot about the technology, we talk a lot about some of the things we're learning, we're talking about how, you know, we can do, you know, Infosec for, you know, social justice, as we just learned from Amy and whatnot. So, you know, he said, you know, what about, how did people get into that? How do people get into Infosec? And, you know, looking around the room, you know, I think a lot of people here are already in there, and others I know I've talked to some of you are interested in trying to break in. So what I've tried to do is tried to, you know, basically go back through my experiences in helping people get into and find jobs within information security, as well as other thinkers within Infosec. And, you know, basically what I have found is that it seems to really make sense to me, because some of the things we're going to talk about here this evening in the course of my presentation are things that I've been telling people for decades of how to try and, you know, get to where they want to go. So I thought I would call this Breaking In, or How to Get into Infosec, and hopefully some of you will pick up on the red-blue, you know, look of this. So basically, you know, what I'm here to talk about this evening is that, especially as I look around, you know, the people in this room, and I think about people that I've worked with over the years, there's no one way to get into information security. So, you know, there are different roads that could lead to the same endpoint. And, you know, there are many different ways that, you know, what I say here is the road more followed. You might see some of what you hear tonight is like, well, that's what people are doing. I'm already seeing people doing that. Even some of the people in this room, and I would say, that's right, and that's why it's kind of working for them. So there are a lot of different ways that we'll talk about kind of globally that can help you kind of get into that kind of area. And it's okay, because at the end of the day, it's about essentially about people, and it's about you trying to find that next opportunity. It's also about connecting with others who can help you, either now or somewhere down the road. So it's about also trying to put yourself in the right position, or as they say in real estate, it's all about location, location, location. So we're just trying to make sure we put you there. So let's start with how do you start with this, or what are some of the things to kind of think about? And I know, like I said, I know many of you are already in Infosec right now, so it's an idea of taking this away as people approach you in your organization saying, hey, I'm interested in getting into Infosec and the like, is that, and I'm not telling you anything you probably already don't know, and that is the simple fact that Infosec is going to be here to stay. Doing some research here to try and get some of the latest and greatest information. Got some information from ISACA that basically estimates that there are about 40,000 unfilled Infosec jobs every year across the country. And if you kind of multiply that out, that could change and become something more like 2 million that are going to be needed by 2019. So we're basically just a little over a year away from that. So it's going to be interesting to see, if organizations are going to clue in and start making IT security an even bigger priority than it already is, or if that's going to be a battle that's going to be continuing to be fought here. So, but there's a lot of empty desks right now in that. So the good news is, not only for those of us that are already in it and working now, opportunities for growth will certainly be there, but also for those that are looking to get in some way, shape, or form, the opportunities abound for you. So when when I talk to my kids and try and help them understand something, and and it doesn't work out quite the way they thought it would, I like to say to them, there are many ways to get to LA. So just as with kids, I like to think that there's also the case with getting into Infosec. So basically there's no one way, as I said a moment ago, to get into the arena, and many of you in this room could probably share stories of how you came in, and there would be some some similarities and some differences. So like I said, there's no one way to go it, but there are some commonalities, or there's some common themes that we're going to discuss this evening that will help increase the likelihood of that sort of thing. And by the way, as I'm going along, if you have any questions, feel free to question along. You don't necessarily have to wait till the end there. And as I look back on this as an HR professional, it's very similar to other positions, not even necessarily relegated only to Infosec, that follow many of these same themes in terms of trying to increase likelihood of trying to get in and be seen in whatever it is they're trying to do. But but many of these themes are very intertwined. Okay, so what I find is very interesting in terms of the coalescence is a lot of this is going to be based on one pillar of education, another of experience, and then another of information sharing, which is obviously something that we're trying to do right here, right now. So, at the end of the day, it's all good. So, one thing to think about, and again, I'm thinking about this, I'm trying to put myself in the position of someone who is on the outside looking in to get into Infosec, is that, and this is all good stuff for you, is that what we find here is that, information security is an advanced and interdisciplinary area. I mean, it is touching a lot of different areas of IT, like systems administration, network administration, to a certain extent even apps development. The idea just simply being that there are many ways of getting in and many areas of exploring and even going back to your roots, depending on how you might get in here. And it's been my experience in talking to people over the years that probably the infrastructure is probably the best way, or the most common way, I should say, that people have found their way into that, how they found their way into information security. So it makes sense because information security has a heavy emphasis on infrastructure. So where does that come from? All right. So, and again, shouldn't come as any surprise. People are going to be able to come to Infosec through things like school, university, colleges, certification courses, technical schools, or maybe you started with something else and eventually moved your way into information security or even on-the-job training. How many times or how many people here have had to, you started in something maybe as a sys or network admin, and then along the way you picked up information security? Yeah, a number of people have done that. So that is a very, very common way of building on that. So, it's a good thing, I think, that there's a lot of different ways to getting into it, and typically the infrastructure way tends to be, you're already working on websites, you're already working on the routers, the switches, the firewalls, all the guts to try and make all that happen, and you kind of go at it from there. But at the end of the day, it's about experience. So it is being able to demonstrate in the course of a conversation with someone, whether you're talking about someone in the employment industry, you're talking to a potential hiring manager, or just someone else that could potentially be that conduit into an organization that has a need for information security, is what kind of work product can you demonstrate that you've touched, okay? So what have you done? What are you currently doing? Those types of things. But I would, unlike a lot of, people, I would make the argument that obviously if you're doing something in a practical business application, that's certainly the first step. But I know some of you, or some folks that I've talked to, have found themselves in a situation, well, how do I get the business? So, if you have a lab or something that you do at home, so it's the idea of, I do this on my personal time, is going to be, it certainly can't replace or trump practical experience, but it's certainly a good replacement for it when it comes to being able to say, hey, I've done some stuff on my own, it's not all book learnedness and that sort of thing. So if you think about it this way, whether you're experienced or not, it's about being able to demonstrate that you're doing it in your own time. What are you doing in your own potential lab or area outside of work? Certainly work related is going to be important, but it's also about what are you doing on your own time. And even to that end, it could come down to what are you running. So it's a case of, okay, are you working in a fairly sophisticated self lab, or where you're having servers, racks of servers, and you've set up a whole infrastructure, or are you just running something off of a PC? Now again, with all of the tools that are available, I mean, that can certainly be having running just off a PC or something like that as your server or whatever can certainly work in your advantage. So I don't want to be able to say that won't help you, but to be able to show that you're using more practical tools, even if you're using all the various cherry pies and the like there, would certainly also be, as part of your explanation, will help you when it comes to what's the environment that you're running, and then what experiments are you running. So I mean, are you playing with something? Are you taking it just beyond, there's learning it and learning it on your own, which is a good thing as well, but also are you taking it and trying to apply it to solve a business problem, maybe something that you've seen, maybe you went to a conference and you're trying to figure out on your own how that might work. So being able to demonstrate your ability to apply what you're learning in a practical application will certainly come into play here. environment, you know, comes in, is kind of like I was saying before. And then at the end of the day, you know, being able to apply what you're learning. So in the course of a conversation, hey, I learned this. I've learned there's a new spin on Splunk or something along those lines, are going to be the types of things that may end up capturing somebody else's attention, and you'll see where that kind of comes into play here in a moment. Any questions so far? I mean, it's pretty straightforward here, I think. But when you think about it, and this comes down to whether you're talking to someone like myself, hiring manager, or anyone else, the thing that that will help someone is help your case is always being able to show that you're someone that's really immersed in what you're doing. You're living and breathing it. That you're able to demonstrate what you're able to do. So these are just examples of, but at the end of the day, you want to be able to demonstrate that you have a passion for what you're talking about. And that is, and this goes back to something I was saying a moment ago. It doesn't matter what your discipline is. Being able to get across to someone that you have a passion about what you're doing will always win the day. So what I'm trying to come together here is that being able to actually show some excitement about what you're learning, show some excitement about what you're applying to. And those are the things that if you can get someone else excited, guess what? You arguably increase the likelihood that you're going to be able to take things further. So when we start talking about one of the things that's, when it comes to experiential learning, there are a lot of different ways of getting to that, but the key is going to be being able to show that you have a true passion for what we're talking about. So now, the other thing that kind of comes into play here is a little bit of, so where do you go, all right? So what that means is, where do you go to do a variety of different things? Where do you go to get new ideas? Where do you go to talk to others that are interested in Infosec in this particular case, or maybe a specific subdivision of Infosec as you have? Are you going to groups or meetups, such as what we have here at NEOISF? You're going to seminars? Are you going to, how many were at the Security Summit last week? Good stuff, right? So, and again, not that if you didn't go, that's a bad thing, but, being able to go to those types of places will certainly help you. Going to conventions. How many went to DerbyCon? Or how many would want to go to DerbyCon? So it's even more. So you get the idea that being able to go out and kind of refresh and see what other people are doing will certainly help as well. So, and then on your own, it's a case of what kind of books, what kind of e-zines, magazines, blogs, white papers, all those types of things are you trying to do, or are you using to generate new ideas? Maybe even supplement some of the things that you're doing in your laboratory. Again, it's not only reinforcing the idea of the passion that you have and that you're trying to demonstrate in all of this, but also you're trying to show learning. Because more often than not, a hiring manager is going to be looking to you to be able to say, okay, I don't want to always have to tell you exactly what to do, especially in Infosec. In many cases, they're expecting you to come and tell them what's going on. So there's kind of a subtle, if not unnecessarily explained or implicit, idea that you're going to be keeping up on what's going on in the world, whether that be through more passive events like the readings and so forth, the blogs, or are you going to be interacting with others that have varying degrees of expertise and interest in other areas and sharing ideas. So learning is certainly going to be another area that is going to be very important for those looking to break in. I always get asked the question, what about certs? What about certifications? As a matter of fact, we were just talking about that here earlier. And, I think certs matter. I think they do. I think they're a good thing. However, and I'm saying this because I think most people in the room would agree with me, so this is more of just reinforcing something that you probably already know, and hopefully are passing this on to those that you might know that are looking at maybe in school or something like that, that, you know, certs are good, but they're no substitute for experience. So to the extent that you can get a practical experience, again, going with either, you know, practical work experience, internships, externships, those types of things, or, you know, or you're doing something in an internal lab in your home or something like that, that will certainly help. But the certifications overall are a good thing. So as I've told many a person, they're better to have than not to have. However, and this is something that I find many people approach me about, is to say, well, you know, maybe it's time for me to look somewhere else because not all organizations will value certifications the same. Has anyone else found that to be the case? You know, some place where you find it's important and maybe they, you know, rightly or wrongly, they're saying, well, maybe not. You don't find it as important. And again, I'm not here to say who's right or who's wrong or anything of that sort. All I'm trying to say is that, you know, I get the question of, should I get certifications? Should I, you know, spend the money to do that even if they're not able to do that? And I would say, oh, on the whole, you're going to be better off if you do than if you don't. But that, of course, at some level, you know, every situation is different, and you've got to be somewhat thoughtful about what yours is, and, you know, does it make economic sense for you to do that if, you know, resources are not available to help you with that. Though certainly last month we had a presentation about how to work with SANS and all the opportunities they have to try and make it work for people. So you never know. So then the next question I usually get is, okay, so what cert should I get? And so I say, you know, that really depends on, you know, the area and experience level that you're at. Now again, we're talking at this more from a entry level or outside looking in kind of situation. And again, broad sweeping generalization, those that, you know, have, you know, already gotten, you know, certs outside of what I'm about to express, that's fine. I mean, it's all good. But again, I usually get questions about where should I start, what should I go with, and if you're really looking to break in, you know, the Security Plus, the Network Plus, CCNA, CCNP, MCSEs, all those sorts of things will certainly, you know, be very helpful. But at the same time, you know, you're thinking about long term, and many of the people in this room I know have the CISSP. You know, if you're looking at a position that might involve auditing, maybe the CISA, or if you're looking or thinking about somewhere down the road of becoming a manager, maybe the CISM will be something that you'll be thinking about down the road. And for those, you know, for those of you that don't know, but like, you know, the CISSP, you need 5 years of experience typically. Now, granted, depending on your level of education, that may knock a few years off, but you know, it's really hard to get the CISSP if you don't have the experience. So to help you get the experience from a certification standpoint, then the, you know, the what I call like the lower level fruits might be more advantageous.
The CISSP also has an associates.
Okay.
It's a program that if you don't have the required number of years, you can still get a certification as soon as you have that. It was 5 years or 4 years with a bachelor's degree.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So, which again, you know, for those that have the bachelor's, would be a good, you know, be a good thing. Of course, then again, you get into the educational thing. So, you know, for those that may not, because not everyone has that opportunity. And then, of course, you know, the SANS opportunities, whether you're talking GSEC, GPEN, GWAT, all those other various things. It seems like there's an alphabet soup of various certs that are out there. So, you know, that's all for another time. But you get the basic idea of some that, you know, will show a level of commitment to InfoSec at the various levels of someone's career that could be very important from the standpoint of being able to show a commitment, being able to demonstrate the passion that you have for InfoSec, and moving forward from there. Obviously, it's not a etched in stone roadmap, but it certainly doesn't hurt. So then, one of the last things that helps as well, and especially as, you know, you might be someone looking to break in and get into InfoSec, and you're looking kind of, okay, what should I be trying to do, planning for it ideally, is I look over the horizon, and, it's basically the idea of, I call it sending the elevator back down, and that is being able to share the information. And a moment ago we were talking about, coming to events like this, or larger events like the Information Security Summit, or even something larger like a DerbyCon, or any of the other conventions that are out there for InfoSec. And once you start having some ideas, trying to share them and give back to the community, whether it's through speaking or writing, volunteering, which is very popular. And a good way, if you're like, okay, how is one way for me to get some practical experience? And sometimes that's just volunteering. We've heard some good presentations over the time about various groups that look to having volunteers help them with their mission and whatnot. But the idea of trying to expand and deepen your understanding of InfoSec, this kind of just goes back to, does a couple of things. It goes back and it reinforces the idea of passion. It also reinforces to a certain extent the idea of learning, but now we're doing something different, and now we're sharing. There's an old saying that to really understand something, you need to teach it. So putting yourself into a position where you can talk about something that you've maybe done in your own personal lab, if you're not in an InfoSec opportunity, or something of that sort, can also certainly raise your viability as may not necessarily be a subject matter expert, but you could certainly show yourself to be someone who's knowledgeable about something that you can then parlay into something more lucrative for what you're looking for. So hopefully that helps in terms of kind of, like I said, sending the elevator back down, but also helping you stay fresh as well. So to kind of recap a little bit, I mean, hopefully that, if you don't remember anything else from this presentation, there are going to be three things that you will hopefully take with you. That, understanding that all things being equal are tangible, as well as very intangible things that, hiring people and people like myself that broker these opportunities look for. And that's basically passion in what you want to do, the ability to show that you're learning and you're able to apply what you learn, and then the opportunity to basically share. Okay? So passion, learning, sharing. So with that, it's that infamous moment. Questions? Yes, sir.
So I'll add one more comment based on what I kind of see out there. Is where in the role I'm in, I'm seeing a lot more where we've got normal network and security people, and they're used to like the ones going and pushing the buttons and doing the things.
Yep.
Because of that entire lack of personnel from a broad sense that you were talking about, 2 million people, we're seeing more and more need for automation. So as you think about trying to get to the point where you emphasize your career skills and elevate your career skills, focusing on those technologies that can help with the automation. So it's not a person that's pushing the button, but you're the guy who's designing the thing that pushes the button, is really what the next step is going to be.
And that's an excellent point. And that goes to something I really wasn't talking too much about, but it brings up the point, and that is, and I think many of us in this room will certainly be able to go, oh yeah, been there, done that. And that is, many organizations still haven't quite figured out what to do with InfoSec. What are you guys? What do you do? I mean, you're there to protect the walls and the firewalls and everything, but they don't get how we do it. So, in some cases, that's what many executives I've talked to, that's what they think InfoSec is, pushing buttons. Oh, we have to have someone watching the SIM all the time. Well, you can save some cash by automating it, or automation. So you make a very, very valid point, and that's showing an application, and it also is something that if you can, basically you can capture just about anyone's attention, even if they don't have necessarily an opening, by saying, you know, I can show you how to automate this, and so you can save money. There isn't an organization out there that doesn't want to save money in some way, shape, or form. So thank you for your comment. That's dead on. Anything else? Yes?
Is there any direct sources you recommend for learning, like YouTube channels or websites? Yeah.
Certainly. I mean, you know, certainly as a kind of a behind-the-scenes kind of thing, you know, learning, you know, if it helps you to learn how to set something up, certainly YouTube is a great way to go, or any of the wikis that might be out there that might give you some code or some of those other areas. So those would certainly be you know, good places to be. And from a couple of presentations ago, if you're in a position where maybe you're going to a wiki of some sort, and very frequently, sometimes, you know, putting stuff in there and leaving, you know, some ideas, codes, or whatever has been successful for you, leaving it there may also create some opportunities to be seen as someone like, oh, here's someone that knows what they're talking about. So, does that help?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Good stuff. All right, well, and last but not least, shameless plug. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to help you. So thank you for your attention, and I hope this was helpful. Thank you. I don't know if you want to.
Ben Parker's
I don't know if you want to say that for the website.
There's a talk on securing AWS.
Don't they usually upload one?
No, they usually do the video.
Okay. All right.
Okay. So, as Justin said, my name is Ben Parker. I'm a system engineer with Palo Alto Networks here in Northeast Ohio. And today I wanted to talk about securing AWS. Since I threw a couple ideas out for Justin when, I think it was 2 months ago, he said, hey, we need some people to talk about stuff. And I said, here's a list of ideas. What do you want to pick? And he's like, AWS. I was like, okay. So, as we start talking about AWS and talk about moving to the cloud, I kind of want to get an idea of where you guys as an audience are to try and better look at what we're doing. So, how many of you are using AWS or working on moving toward AWS? A couple. How about other cloud systems, Azure? Anyone doing Azure? A couple people in Azure. And then there's probably other people doing SaaS stuff. Google, yes, a couple. All right, so that helps. I'll try and, as we're going through here, since there was several Azure people, where stuff is different, I'll try and point out where it's different as well, because there are some differences. And from the other thing, when I try and address stuff, How many people are like on the coding system development side? How many people are like network people? Network people, they do the kind of designing of infrastructures. Couple, all right. And then straight security people, you guys just look at the alerts. You guys design the security. Not so many of those. All right. So I guess as we look towards the cloud, for those couple of people who said you were looking towards moving to the cloud, why are you guys moving to the cloud? Why are your companies moving to the cloud?
Long-term strategic vision.
Say, what's that?
Long-term strategic vision.
Long-term strategic vision. Okay. What about your long-term strategic vision? Like, why though? Like, what is the business is making a decision? What was that about? To move to the cloud for a reason.
Yeah, I mean, the goal is to lower costs.
Lower costs, okay. I guess I did. I don't know why. So it's booting back up. So, anybody else? Lower cost. Who else is? Why are your companies making decisions to move to the cloud? I think you. No. Did you say it? Not you. You were doing Azure. Why are you guys looking at moving to Azure?
A lot of the SaaS, where I just basically, for cost, you know, spinning it up, speed of getting stuff up.
Speed of getting stuff up, okay?
You know, and basically, we're not getting more staff. So, you know, with our strategy, you know, if the SaaS will do it, but if I still got to patch it back up or whatever, you know, it's not fit. You know, but it helps out with staff reduction.
Okay, staff reduction, speed of deployment. Yep, those are very good reasons. Anyone else?
I'd throw in their expertise. You know, along with staff, it's not only do you have a lot of people, but this technology keeps changing. It's hard to keep
Yeah.
the right people on the staff.
Okay, good point. And this is so as I bring this back up. So those are all good reasons that I hear. A lot of other reasons that I tend to hear are things like availability, because we want to increase our availability, or from a cost standpoint, going SaaS applications, a lot of people are like, we want to, that's usually where the people comes in, is it's easier to have like Office 365 and you just move it out there. So now you no longer have to take care of the Exchange. You no longer have to have the people who have expertise in Exchange. But as we look at some of the other reasons, flexibility, so I think that's what you mentioned there. Speed of deployment was mentioned. Automation is usually a reason that we see a lot of times. Scale, I like that as much rope as you're willing to pay for was the comment. So when you talk about scalability, because you're using the cloud, the model, you have to understand the cloud model is to get you to use the cloud because you're paying for everything that you use. That can be great if you've got DR sites up there and that's all you're doing. It can be great if you have to have environments that are very, very scalable. So you have to have environments that go up and down. Retailers right now is a great example. That this will be the holiday season. They're probably going to see more business concurrently right now than they will any other time of the year. So if they can just spend for those servers, those resources they're using right now, and not have to pay for that capacity that's going to be sitting there idle 75% of the rest of the year, then that is a cost savings. So today, from a security standpoint, I'm going to focus on AWS, which is infrastructure as a service. So basically, you're deploying applications out into the cloud on the servers that you're putting out there. There's also platform as a service and software as a service. We can, if you've got questions on those, please bring them up. I want this to be very, you guys have a lot of questions. I want it to be very back and forth as we're going through this. So as I look at kind of some of the reasons for building a cloud, what the types of things that you can do as you move to the cloud, you have to think of it and change kind of the model or the mindset that you've gone into it. So traditionally, when we build out networks, we build out a network and say, okay, here's a block of addresses. I put my servers on those addresses, and I'm just going to continue to build stuff out like that. And a lot of people will say, okay, if I'm moving to the cloud, I'm going to take that concept that I had before, and I'm just going to carte blanche move it to the cloud. So I'm going to have my set of servers. I'm going to have my address blocks. I'm going to create a VPN connection back and forth, and it's just going to be basically another VLAN that I'm going to have, except for it's going to be stored up in the cloud. We really want to take advantages of the stuff that the cloud brings us and be able to deploy applications in the way that make it more beneficial. So if you take an example of this, you see here, this is the top one, would represent kind of like an Azure instance, and the bottom one would represent an AWS instance. Those are the same applications running on the same IP addresses, and you can actually use that just like it is. So if you've got an application that you want to be redundant across both of those providers, there's nothing that the app developers have to do. So when you're talking about speed of deployment and upgrades, there's nothing app developers have to do that is different between those. To them, a server is a server. It's got the same IP address. If I need a clone or DR, nothing changes. I just deploy it into that environment. So being able to take advantage of stuff like that and do load balancing is one of the key things. Is look at it as building blocks. So if I take a look at kind of what the process is, you'll see here I've got up top, we're talking about AWS, so I've got a VPC. We'll get into all these terms later, so I'm going to try and define terms as we go. But we've got something in US West, so that's a region. We've got another one here in US East, and you saw I spun up another one here in US East. So I initially had Route 53. Does anyone know what that is? DNS, yes. So you can do load balancing of addresses. So I've got my 2 servers that are going to the services here. Those are load balanced across those. So I've got multiple regions, availability across multiple regions. And what I did was I just duplicated this entire VPC, cloned it down, and now I've got a fresh instance. I can do my upgrades, I can do my installs, I can do my testing, I can do my QA on the exact same instance that I just cloned for my production. So I go to the next step, and I just roll that production instance or that test instance that's upgraded into my production. I'm now load balancing across those 3 instances. Everything goes well, then I can start taking out the other instances. So I'm now seamlessly upgrading my application systems. So when you think about kind of the scalability of what cloud is for, it's this type of stuff that you want to be able to think about, that you want to be able to use the advantages of. That make sense? So talking about where we look at security from the perspective, security when you talk about cloud security is very much a shared security model. So AWS, Microsoft and Azure, Google in their cloud, they're responsible for the service itself, for underneath the line. They're responsible for making sure that their stuff stays secure. They're not responsible for your servers, your infrastructure on top of it. You're responsible for that. You talk to Microsoft, and Microsoft is going to say, yes, we're secure. Or AWS is going to say, yes, we're secure. We meet all the compliance. We meet HIPAA compliance. We meet PCI compliance. All of that, we meet. You're good to go. You'll have no issues if you deploy in our environment. That is absolutely true. It also absolutely leaves you very much exposed as long as if you don't put the protections in place. And that was, this is part of the reason why when we were talking about teaching, like going out and sharing with the community, that's part of the reason I wanted to do this, is because I've been in a couple of different customers now where they've had, in their case it was Microsoft, come in and say, hey, go ahead and deploy this out, roll this out, you're going to be safe, you're going to be good to go. And then Microsoft wants to get you to use their stuff, so they're rolling that out. And didn't kind of properly do the security behind it, which causes problems. If you're going to do this, and there are reasons to do it, the business is saying there's reasons to do it, let's do it right the first time. So that's kind of what the goal is here. So security in the cloud is just like security on-prem. You've got security that you're putting on-prem, you've got firewalls, you've got WAFs, you've got load balancers, you've got all this stuff that you're putting on-prem to protect it. You're now moving all this stuff to the cloud. You still need the same security. All the reasons that you had when you put it on-prem, you still have all of those reasons in the cloud, all those same things that you have to do. And a lot of times we don't think about that. So how do you actually go about it? It's really about data flows. Like when you look at what do I need to secure as I'm putting stuff up there, look at the data flows. What is the data that's important? What are the things that you need to look at? Is there toxic information you're putting up there, meaning it's PII, PCI, intellectual property, or PHI? if that data is going up there, you absolutely have to have extra controls. And by the way, there's a lot of people that are moving that data up there. Specifically, there's a lot of people that are moving PCI data up into the cloud because they can say, okay, I've got a VPC. A VPC is a private network. I segment everything up there. If that's my PCI scope, then I only have to scan one PCI scope. And I can secure everything inside that PCI scope. I send all my APIs, calls up to that to do my processing. And then I don't have to have all those scans and all those audits on my regular network. So I mitigate a lot of that. You're laughing. It's true though.
I believe it. It's just kind of funny.
So as we get to the framework and kind of going through the definitions, we look at EC2. So we're talking about AWS. EC2 is your elastic compute. That is the stuff that you're basically using to build servers. So your instances, your network interfaces, load balancers, scaling groups, that's the stuff that's in EC2. It's where you go to add the compute cycles, which is your power, your CPU. S3 is your storage. A lot of times you will do storage and you'll add storage accounts and bit buckets and stuff like that. That gets stored in S3. A region. These are all regions up here. So those are basically the regions that AWS has. Those are data centers. That's how you break it down. There are differences between what data centers support. So certain data centers only support certain instance sizes. So if you need to have a requirement that says this region is going to actually mirror something over to this region over here, and I'm going to do replication, and I'm going to have automatic failover and stuff like that, you need to make sure that you get regions that are the same, that are compatible, because they're basically like waves that when AWS built the data centers that have certain types of hardware and support certain things, those kind of waves are the ones that match. So you need to make sure you have regions that match those kind of waves. And IAM is, I've added it here, not because it's necessarily a security thing that we're building in, but that's what gives you access to your AWS account. You should really put two-factor authentication on that, because there's been lots of cases where people may be like programming and coding stuff in GitHub, and they end up putting their credentials in there for their AWS account. And GitHub is a lot of times open, and so people are going in and finding that hard-coded credentials to change stuff. And now somebody has your AWS account, and guess what you can spin up with an AWS account? You can spin up really expensive servers to do things like Bitcoin mining. Guess how fast that bill goes? It's really, really fast. So make sure you put like two-factor authentication in front of that. Yes?
So this is probably my developer showing, but how come you didn't mention Lambda?
So because there's a whole slew of other things.
Okay.
So yeah, so there's Lambda functions, which are basically, you can put code in there that can run, and it can do other stuff to AWS itself. So it's really interesting. Like, I don't know a ton about it because I'm not a programmer, but it's really interesting. If you want to talk about it, you give a better, give a description. What's Lambda?
I mean, basically, so your elastic compute is I want to run anything, whereas Lambda is I want to perform this operation on, say, this data set. It's very scoped and it's very scaled down, as opposed to I want to compute, anything. I want to be Wolfram Alpha. No, Lambda's like, okay, I'm a calculator. That's what I do. That's grossly oversimplifying, but it's just interesting to me because a lot of times people will, in a security context, because a lot of times people will take that for granted and act like, since it is so ephemeral, it must be secure. So it doesn't matter what data I put up here to run my compute over, it's going to go away. And that is 100% not the case. It goes away to you, but that doesn't mean you can just turn a blind eye to security.
Yeah. Well, and that's the same thing with, is it Cosmo? There's some new DBs they've released, because they have the same thing from a database perspective now, that you can just run, this is my one little database up there, and I'm just doing it. And so we use, there's some extra functionality that we use where we're saying, okay, I'm going to take X44 addresses, and I'm going to run them through Lambda code, or if I'm auto-scaling stuff out, and we see a certain percentage of traffic, then we need to add more instances, and we auto-scale those, and we try and do automation for all that. So we automatically add the addresses and the tags and all of that stuff to make it all work. All that is, for us, is done in Lambda code, because we're saying, okay, we're watching CloudWatch, which is another piece where you're basically monitoring the status of your systems, and based on that, we're taking some action. That action gets called into Lambda code. Lambda code runs this process and tells this thing to do some other stuff. So, yeah, those are all pieces. Thank you for bringing that up. If there's more stuff that I missed along the way from anybody, please do. So VPC. A VPC is a private network. That's basically it. It's your big virtual private network. That's layer 2. Like, most of the time, you're going to see it's a /16. You can go all the way down to a /28. Usually, they say design this to be bigger, because then you can grow if you need to. If you make it smaller, then you have to wipe it out, and you're going to rebuild everything up in a bigger one. And it's lots of space. So they just say reuse it, make it as big as you want, up to a /16. You can make lots of them. There are reasons to make lots of them that we'll get into when we get to the routing, depending on what your architecture looks like. Trying to think what else about VPCs. So that example that I showed where I had like several that were the same IP addresses, that's most of the time that is not the best practice per se, depending on what your architecture is. If your architecture was that exact thing where I've got an app and I've got this multiple app that I'm doing over and over and over again, then you can do something like that, because you're just going to go hit the public front-end IP address. If you ever want these VPCs to be able to talk to one another, so if you've got like a web server and it has to talk to a database server and it's got to talk to another database server, and those are all going to be in AWS, and you want to do segmentation between them and have them talk to each other, the back-end IP addresses have to be different. So they have to be in different connections. Does that make sense?
They won't sell you NAT?
What's that?
They won't sell you a NAT service between the two?
So you can do that, but there's a cost thing when you get to that.
I just want to know if that was.
Yeah, you can. Most of the time, you're going to want to, best practice, if you're going to be able to do that, is to just create separate ones, because you can create VPC peers, and the cost of having a direct VPC peer between two VPCs is less than having another NAT instance and funneling that additional traffic through that NAT instance. To go back. So best practice is create them with separate ones in those cases. Subnets then. So your subnets are how you break up your VPCs. So you see each one of these subnets, you basically have two kinds of subnets. You have public subnets and you have private subnets. Public subnets have an internet gateway associated with them. So all of these have a main route table. That route table, and you can see the route tables are up here. So you see every single subnet has this local address, or this local one, that's for the entire VPC. So inside this subnet has a way to talk to everything else in the VPC. The other thing that you can do is you can add custom ones. So because it's public, it's got this internet gateway address, so 0.0.0 goes to the internet gateway. So that's been added. So that makes this particular one a public one. This one down here is a private one. So in order for it to get to the internet, it's got a route that says, in order to go to 0.0.0, I have to go to this NAT gateway that's in my public address in order to be able to get out. So you can build subnets like that. You see I've got a whole bunch of different, I took a screenshot down here, so I've got a whole bunch of different subnets, and each one of those subnets I have private. So I want to split up my applications behind there into different availability zones. So as I'm doing that, I've got multiple different subnets, and each one of those availability zones control what it's doing as an example, but the important thing is public and private. Those are your two main options, and you can have individual route tables for each one that we'll get into more. Instances, there's a lot of different instances. This is basically the size of compute that you want. So different compute can run different stuff. A lot of times, even the security appliances that you're going to get will run on instances. So like we have VMs. Our VMs will run on an instance. Your throughput is based on the size of VM that you get and the size of instance. The bigger you are, the more you can do, more cost. Smaller you are, less throughput, cost. Make sense? Load balancers. So when you're architecting an AWS instance or an AWS design, load balancers is what has started to become really, really important. So you can do things like have traditional HA where you've got an IP address and it's maybe a floating IP address, and so you send traffic to that, and you can do failover. It's really not recommended because you have to, everything that's happening in AWS is based on an API. So if there's some action that happens and you need to do a failover for some reason, doing an HA failover like you traditionally do on the network side can take 30 seconds, 5 minutes. It can take a long time, which is not what you want from an availability perspective. So what they do, and the concept is called load balancers. And there's a couple of different load balancers that AWS has. There is the application load balancer. This one is fairly new. The network load balancer, the classic load balancer. That is traditionally what they have. You see, these two are supported only in VPCs. This is like an EC2 Classic. Hopefully no one out there still has EC2 Classic. Try and move off of it if you do. This is basically the newer version of this. They haven't said it, but I would say this is going away. There's little buttons everywhere that say, do you want to upgrade if you've got a classic load balancer? So, and I've got another screenshot that shows like the features that are supported. As you're going through, there's a couple important things to think about when you're doing load balancing. The main one is you see that preserve source IP from a feature. This application load balancer, can only look at HTTP and HTTPS traffic. But as a part of that, it's doing a destination NAT for any traffic that's coming in. So traffic kind of works as you'll say, here I've got an IP address or a DNS address. That's going to go to the load balancer. The load balancer has targets behind it. Those are basically instances or other CPUs. It needs to check and make sure those are alive. That determines where it's going to be able to send traffic.